Oh, here we go.
Yeah, we're good.
We're up. Okay. So welcome to an informational meeting of the town of Manlius regarding the Meadowbrook Limestone sewage treatment plant and the plans for work thereon. And we are honored to have with us the director of, or commissioner of the wastewater water environment protection for the Onondaga County. And that is Shane Hardy, who is, it is now pouring rain, who's going to speak to us and share some information about what's planned for the wastewater treatment plant and answer some questions from that we've sent her in advance to things that neighbors are concerned about. This meeting is recorded, so people who are not able to be here in person will still be able to get the information.
And it's live as well.
It's live.
Yeah, just like a regular board meeting, I mean it.
Yeah. So, do you want to make some, Mike, do you want to make some opening remarks?
You just tell me what.
All right, so you ready for me?
Ready.
All right, well, I'm gonna keep this very informational style, because I kind of wanted to just have a dialogue. I know there's a lot of questions, and wastewater is a very difficult and complicated subject, and probably no more so than in the county sewer system, because we are a really big system. But a little bit about us, I guess, to kind of get you guys started. We are the county sewer utility. We do serve 75% of the county population, and we own and operate and maintain 6 different wastewater treatment plants throughout Onondaga County. The biggest one is the one that everybody knows, and that's our Metro facility on Hiawatha next to the mall. But the town of Manlius is located in our Meadowbrook Limestone wastewater treatment plant service area. And we serve within this service area, it's the towns of Manlius, Pompey, DeWitt, the villages of Fayetteville and Manlius, and then a really small portion of the city of Syracuse. And what you can see up there on the figure is actually the service area that we collect wastewater from. And so it goes all the way, to the south, down there. You can see one little area in that lower right-hand corner. That's actually the town of Pompey. It's a tiny little area. But then it goes all the way over to the hamlet of Janesville and the town of DeWitt in the southwest corner. And then you can kind of see as we get up over 481, there's that section that reaches up into the city of Syracuse. And then the wastewater treatment plant, for those who aren't aware, is actually in the upper right-hand corner over by, obviously, as many of the residents know, over by Green Lakes. One of the things about this wastewater treatment plant and its service area, so this is one of our mid-sized treatment plants. It's 6.5 million gallons per day. It's not gonna really mean much to you folks, but one of the things that's unique about this service area is it has a lot of what we call inflow and infiltration. So on a day like today, when it rains, that plant, which would normally operate at about 60% capacity or less on a wet weather day, can reach flows that are 10 to 12 times that normal amount. So it's a big brush of flow that comes into that collection or into that wastewater treatment plant. And I think that's one of the questions that was asked was, what's the consent order? What's the compliance issue? And that's what the issue is at that facility. It's not related to odors. It's related to the wet weather flows. And where is that rainwater coming into the collection system? It's coming in through broken sewer pipes in the roads, broken sewer laterals, maybe footers or sump pumps that are connected. One of the things, one of the big areas that we're now looking at is the low-lying trunk sewers, because a lot of these creeks are now flooding a lot more, and that water is getting in. So that's a lot. This is the characteristics about this service area. It is under a consent order, and it has been since 2019, related to the collection system and what the collection system is doing at the plants.
Shannon, can you explain what that means?
A consent order,
Yeah.
right? So what ends up happening, we're regulated, we're permitted by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. We have what's called a speedy permit, and that's actually, that permit from the state says how much wastewater that treatment plant can handle and how much we can discharge to Limestone Creek. It says what that wastewater characteristics needs to be, how much organic content, suspended solids, and when you get a permit violation, we don't meet those water quality characteristics, we're issued typically a notice of violation. The problem with this plant is because of those wet weather events, it violates quite frequently. And because those flows exceed the amount of water that they're supposed to be treating. So after, after a certain amount of time, after you have so many violations, what the state does is they then put you into a consent order, which is a long-term agreement with the state that says, we as the permittee agree to do certain things to stop being out of compliance. And so the consent order that we're in now with the state is that we've agreed through the county to invest $9 million in the collection system. We've spent about $5 million of that so far to fix the collection system, to find those places where it's broken, to find where that wet weather is coming in. We have another $4 million that we are slated to spend over the next probably 18 months to 2 years. And we anticipate probably spending even more as we continue to go, because the more water we separate, the more water we get out, the more capacity we have available for community development.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So the county bought the sewer lines from all the other municipalities. Was that part of this, that in order to fix things, the county wanted to own them?
Correct. And so
Okay.
that's a great question. So back in, actually, that's when I joined the county, was in 2019, was we started the sewer consolidation initiative. And what that was is we targeted this service area where we lease the sewer systems from the town of Manlius, the town of Pompey, the villages of Fayetteville, the village of Manlius. And what that allows us to do is then take that money and spend it fixing the pipes in those systems. Without that lease agreement, it becomes difficult to spend our money on town.
I know, people's pipes, right? Yeah.
So that lease agreement was the legal mechanism that allows us to get in and start fixing those pipes. Actually, one of the projects, the little sidebar on this, is one of the other projects that we were doing because of that lease agreement. We have initiated a capital program to upgrade all of the pump stations located in the town of Manlius. We have hired an engineer. We're hoping to get that project kicked off later this summer and in the fall. So we're pretty excited about that. That lease mechanism has been a great opportunity for me as the commissioner to get into our collection systems and start making some pretty dynamic investments to get capacity back. And to ensure the systems are working well to support community development.
So have you been able to measure that inflow and infiltration is less than it used to be?
So we are looking at, in certain areas, we are seeing improvements, but we know we're shifting our strategy, as I mentioned. Tropical Storm Fred opened our eyes a lot. What we noticed in Tropical Storm Fred was a lot of those low-lying areas were contributing a lot more flow than we originally had thought. And so the next round of remediation and investment in the collection system is likely going to be in some of those more low-lying areas that are really, when it rains and the water comes up quickly, it's getting in. So that's going to be, we've kind of changed our approach a little bit.
Is it getting into the pipes that are going through those low areas? Or where is it getting in?
It's not a one straight answer. And I think when you look at the topography, sometimes it's in a manhole. If a manhole is in a low-lying area, it's got what we call pit holes. Everybody likes them on their street because if there's ponding water, it will flow in through that manhole. And so we've identified a couple of low-lying streets that it's getting in through the manhole covers. We've got some manholes that are along the creeks where if it's getting up over the manhole cover, or if the sides of the structure, if it's sticking up out of the ground, but it's got holes in the concrete, it can get in through there. It's really a whole menu of different ways that it's getting in. And, you know, some of the areas we're looking at subdivisions that have some pumps that are connected to laterals, or maybe, you know, depending on the type of construction, maybe there's footer drains that are keeping the basement dry that are interconnected to the lateral. So there's a lot of different places it's coming in.
When you say they're interconnected like that, that means somebody's home is tied directly into the sewer system?
Yes, there's some pumps, or maybe the footer drains on their basement are connected into the sewer lateral.
So this is like what's happening in the city of Syracuse with the sewage overflow?
The city of Syracuse is a different issue because in that system, their storm sewers are connected to their sanitary system, which was allowed at the time. Out here, it is a separate system, so the storm sewers are not connected to the sanitary system. But on the private side, what we call private I&I, that's what's happening, is if you have a sump pump and you don't have a place to put it, a lot of times what ends up happening is they'll connect it into their.
So they're illegally doing that?
It is an illegal connection, yes.
So that's where I was going, so who, are they hiring like a contractor to come in and then they're tapping in without the county knowing?
It's tough saying, and I think a lot of times, a lot of people just don't even know, or it was, they moved into a home and it was there, or they moved in.
I do, my old neighborhood has a lot of flooding, and I know a lot of people who knew they were violating the law and did it because there's some pump. Right, their basement was either flooding and the water was going nowhere, or they were breaking the law and it was going somewhere.
And I think that's some of the challenges, right, is it's, and as much as it's illegal, it's, you have a property owner who has a problem with a wet basement, and if there isn't an adjacent separate storm sewer for them to connect to. And so it's not always a cut and dry, easy answer to say disconnected. You know, we want it disconnected, we certainly absolutely want it connected, but, you know, we can have them disconnected, they can put it out onto the ground, and we walk away, and they can reconnect it. And so I think that's some of the stuff that we're trying to work more collaboratively to come up with solutions that are actually solve the problem long term.
I'm just trying to understand this, and I think I'm picking up on it. It's not like they went out and ran online and dug out to like the main system. They're like tapping into where their sewer goes out to the road in their house,
A lot
pumping it in there, and then it goes out to the sewer.
of times that's what we find when we're working with people, and, you know, not everybody gets a plumbing permit, or not everybody, you know, understands those rules.
I don't think I heard you, this is jumping back to the pump station upgrades, what was the projection on that? Was it, you said it's late summer, fall of 25?
No, we recently hired the engineer, and so they'll be starting the engineering, there's a whole engineering report process that has to be done. So I would say that, you know, our typical capital program takes us anywhere from 3 to 5 years to implement.
But they're starting now and they're gonna hit analyzing all of the pump stations.
Yep.
Who's the engineering?
I don't have to, I don't know off the top of my head.
Are there a lot of pump stations in this, just, like, how many pump stations would a typical treatment plant have?
So the town of Manlius has the most.
We have a lot of towns.
You have a lot of pump stations, and
You need what?
you know, if you had asked me that probably 5 years ago when we were doing consolidation, I would have been able to rattle the number right off for you, but I wanna say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 9 to 11. And, you know, and a typical pump station upgrade is anywhere from $1 million to $2 million, so, you know, it most likely when we implement it, it'll probably be a $10 to $50 million project to go and upgrade them all.
We were kind of hit to this when the 2021 heavy rain season kind of overtook the pump station in the town by the Cavalry Club golf course. That one
Yes.
really upgraded some serious problems.
It did. Yeah, it did. And I think that's some of the things that we're now looking at, and consolidation has allowed us to do that, to go in and start looking at the entire collection system and look at those vulnerabilities. One of the things that a lot of the, you know, we are also working on, we are actually have a project with FEMA. As a result of Tropical Storm Fred, we did apply for, and we do have grant monies from them that is looking at each of our 6 service areas, because we did sustain a lot of damage. Every single one of our pump station, or every single one of our wastewater treatment plants sustained significant damage. We lost treatment. We had probably another 25 or 30 pump stations that sustained pretty critical damage. And so they're working with us, we're looking at mitigation efforts to elevate and or identify those manholes. Where did the water get in? So we're gonna be using some of that FEMA money to help fortify the collection systems.
So I do apologize, I was a few minutes late, but are you suggesting that the reason why we're having so many issues and so much trouble in East Syracuse is because of groundwater or stormwater or homeowners putting fresh water or stormwater into the system?
No, what I was addressing was, I know there was one of the questions from the residents was the consent order that this plant is not compliant. So we were talking about what is the non-compliance issue.
Okay.
And it's, strictly related to wet weather and.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
So the other piece that I had read about in the capital plan that I had looked at was replacement of a covering that was supposed to help contain an odor, if I'm interpreting that correctly.
That's what I'm here to talk about.
That's what I'm gonna
So no, that's a great segue. So actually, if you wanna go back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It is okay. So a little bit of history about odors. How does everybody knows wastewater smells? Right? But it's not something that we're regulated for. Interestingly enough, we are not required to not smell. That being said, the department has a history of trying to be a good neighbor. And so I on the upper right hand, or on the right hand side, I wanted to list out for you each of our other 5 wastewater treatment plants and kind of give you an idea of the size of them and when odor control went in. And obviously the Metro wastewater treatment plant is our biggest one, and that's the one that's next to the mall. That has had odor control since, I said the early 2000s, but I want to say it was somewhere between like 2004 to 2006 that those odor control systems went in, and they've been gradually adding them. In fact, actually, we're in the process now of, I think, where it's odor control version 5.2. We're in a capital project that's going to add even more because there's still areas that still smell, and because it's so heavily populated there. That's really where we started most of our odor control. And a lot of that was also tied to not only the raw waste odor coming in, but the way we were doing biosolids, our sludge processing. Our Wetzel wastewater treatment plant, which a lot of people don't even know exists.
What's that one called?
Wetzel. It is, anybody know where Avicoli's is, about 57?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually, if you were to go to Avicoli's and hang left and head down to the river, it's actually tucked down in the swamps. And it didn't have odor control until that facility went through a major upgrade about 20 years ago. And so as part of that upgrade, they just added it because it was the time, not that there was a lot of neighbors, but it was the right thing to do. And so you'll hear there's things that are gonna trigger odor control, and it's either going to be a neighbor or was the plant under a major upgrade. The Oak Orchard wastewater treatment plant, which everybody knows because that's where Micron's going. That's up along the river, the Oneida River, and it went through a major headworks upgrade, which is the front, but that's our front end, that's where the raw sewage comes in. And because it was in a major upgrade, that was the time they added odor control for that portion of the facility, largely to relieve the impact on the operators of the facility. And then there was a law. Actually, the department went through a period where it didn't do odor control at all. And it wasn't until it didn't pick back up again until somewhere around, 2015, 2016. Our Brewerton wastewater treatment plant was this really tiny plant up in the Brewerton area along Oneida River, very small. It's our tiniest plant, but a really high-end subdivision moved in next door. And the residents, as you can imagine, it smelled, and so there was a lot of concerns and complaints. So in response to that, in 2019, there was a major upgrade to blowers and aeration, and it was the time they went in and they added some covers, and they added some ventilation, and they added an odor control system.
Is that the type of upgrade that's being engineered now for?
Yep. And so then the last facility that just most recently actually finally got odor control was our Baldwin soap plant, which is actually it's one of our larger facilities, 9 million gallons per day. It's tucked up along 370, along a residential subdivision that moved in next to them, very similar theme, people moved in, and they live right on the property line. And we had the plant over time was really starting to smell a lot more and more and more. And what it came down to was, you hear this theme a lot, it was the sludge processing. One of our waste streams, when we process that stuff, it creates a really nasty putrid odors. And so we just finished, I want to say it was probably a $25 million upgrade to the facility, changing the entire way that the sludge is processed and adding odor control. And it was a pretty massive upgrade, and all 5 of these facilities, we stopped smelling. And so that's around the same time, I want to say it was probably 2 or 3 years ago, as we were starting the BSK project, and we were into construction and getting that going. I've just taken over as commissioner, started to hear a lot about the Meadowbrook Limestone. I think there was a summer, I don't remember exactly the year it was, but there was a summer where we called it the explosion of the odor control complaints. And I want to say it was like around,
2020.
I think it was 2020.
We started it.
During COVID.
Yeah, Ingrid and I lived in Fremont Meadows, and it was during COVID, and everybody was home. And
Yeah.
if you were working, it was nice out, you'd work on your deck, but you couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And people were trying to be healthy and walk and still, right? And it was terrible. So, I just started going with everybody and getting in our Facebook group and saying, look, you gotta call, because that's what we were told. Because I knew Brian Bungalow, and I was like, what do we do? This is so bad. And when your guys come, they can't smell it. But they can't smell it because they're conditioned to it. They work around it all day. So it's frustrating when you have really great people coming out to try to help you. They can't smell it, and you're gagging while you're talking to them. And so it went way up. And then, the only reason you would see it trail off is just because we were so tired of making the phone calls.
And I think that was, and I think that's my experience when I came to the department, when I started in 2019 was, yeah, we smell, we're a wastewater treatment plant. And I think it's not who we want to be. It's just not who we want to
And
be.
we all understand it smells, but to the point where you physically gag when you're outside, the eclipse was horrible. We had a lot of families in from out of town to visit, friends, and they were outside, and we were all standing out there. Everybody went in, and then we blew up our communication. It was like, oh, this is terrible, it's, I'm just happy to know something's being done, and, please go on, because I'm excited to report back about, what the
Yeah. So, and I think that's an important thing for, for us to acknowledge that it is a changing approach to who we want to be as a utility, who we want to be as a neighbor. It's a commitment to making it better for our surrounding neighbors, making it better at our facilities. I know when we want people to come and work for us. You don't want to smell so bad that your employees don't want to be there. So that's what you're starting to see as a reinvestment and really starting to look out into the collection system. That will be the next wave of odor mitigations is where are these wastewater treatment, where are the pump stations now that people have been complaining about? And what more can we do to make us a better utility? So if you want to jump to the next slide.
Shannon, what's the timetable for the covering for that
We'll get to
project?
that.
Segue again.
Ingrid, you are all about the segue.
It is all about the segue. So I think the biggest question is what smells, right? So obviously there's on the left-hand side, and it's kind of small, maybe the people who are watching remotely can see a little bit better, but on the left-hand side, you can see where we're situated. You can see we're in the upper right-hand corner, and you got the golf course, and you've got the residential neighborhood, and if the prevailing winds are going west to east, it's okay. But if the winds shift back, you're gonna pick up the smells across the treatment plant, and it's gonna carry back to that neighborhood. And so on the right-hand side, I kind of zoomed in so you can kind of see what's happening at the, like, this is what our wastewater treatment plant. And I'm gonna walk it counterclockwise around the picture. And in the bottom right-hand corner are influent. That's where the raw sewage comes in. That's one of the areas where we smell. Not a lot, but enough that it's something that, you know, you might pick up. Typical wastewater, raw wastewater smells. We think of hydrogen sulfide, rotten eggs, maybe ammonia, swampy gas. That's the complaint we get when we have a broken force main. It smells like swamp gas. That's on the front end side of the plant. The raw sewage, when it comes up from the influent and it goes to that first blue box up above there. That's our biological treatment. That's our aeration. That's where the majority of the bugs are doing their work. This doesn't smell. And in fact, actually, a lot of operators use odors on the biological side to know that the bugs are happy. It turns really sweet. It's got kind of an organic earthy smell from there. And so that's what we call like our mixed liquor. There's like solids and bugs and all sorts of stuff in there that are doing the work. They go up to the top, what we call clarification, where we settle it out. Sludge comes out. And then that clean water, the treated water, goes to the upper left-hand corner to disinfection and then back out to limestone street. That sludge, that waste product, that sludge processing over there on the left-hand side, in the middle, is where a lot of your odors are gonna come. That's where a lot of the odors come from. We put the sludge in what we call a digester tank where we aerate it. That doesn't smell. But when it goes into what we thicken that sludge, and we've sent it to a rotary drum thickener. Basically, it's like a washing machine for sludge. We spin it out, and we take that thickened sludge and we put it in a holding tank underneath the thickening equipment, and we hold it there until it's ready to haul to Metro. That sludge holding tank and that thickening process is where the majority of what people are smelling is coming from.
So you physically go to Meadowbrook and you pick up the nice coagulated sludge.
Yeah.
And you drive it to Metro.
Yes, you may see one of our tanker trucks driving around on 690.
Great.
We do.
Yeah.
What's that?
So yeah, that is a truck we want to safely arrive at.
Yeah. Yes, you do want that to safely take its contents from point A to point B. Yeah, and the reason why we don't do all of the sludge processing here is because the full digestion, dewatering and disposal is very expensive process. And so we have all central processing at Metro. So we haul from all of those outlying plants to Metro for processing. And in fact, this system, the way it's set up at Meadowbrook Limestone is identical to that Brewerton plant that I told you about, that small little plant up on the north side with the nice new neighborhood that moved in. The odor complaints from those neighbors were from the exact same process.
They've been totally mitigated by the same proposals before us.
Correct.
For Meadowbrook.
We'll have an upgraded system here, right? Because I think at one point, I don't know, if it was 22 or 3, sent something back to some of us and said the only complaint was that there was like a loud noise coming from there.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Actually, when we go to that picture, we'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, so this is, right, so what we're talking about, right, so on the influent, we're looking at hydrogen sulfide, rotten eggs, urine type smell. On this sludge processing, it's a different type of smell because this stuff is kind of degraded and you might pick up hydrogen sulfide, so you might pick up some of that rotten egg, but you also might pick up what we call methyl mercaptans. Just a fancy word for basically like a rotten fish smell. I don't know any other way to describe it, but that's, let me see if I can.
I mean, to be maybe a little bit crude, it literally just smells like shit. Like it smells like shit if you're over in that area. Like that's what it smells like.
It could be honestly, it's probably a whole bouquet of all those smells, and I use the word bouquet
Generously.
generously.
I like bouquet.
Yeah.
It is a bouquet, it is an aroma.
Yeah.
It is, and I think it's, so actually, I got them flipped actually. So what are we talking about, right? So what, the first thing is, when we're doing odor projects. First thing we have to do is, where is it smelling and what is it smelling? Because in order to properly treat those smells, we have to know what they are, because there's different technology to treat all of them. But as I mentioned, so there's two pictures. On the right-hand side, it's actually down at the influent. That's the raw sewage coming in. It's actually 3 stories below grade. But surprisingly, those odors, when we ventilate that space, they can make it up to the surface. On the left-hand side, what you're looking at is the blue doors that you're staring at are the water, inside that building is the water drum thickener. Underneath that, with those grading, is all that thickened sludge. And so, and I will tell you a funny story about this. When I first started working for the county back in, I think, 2019 or 2020, I had gone to take a tour of the plant, and I went and stood over the grading, not thinking. And I was supposed to go out to dinner with some friends afterwards. And I got in my car and I was like, I have to go home. I can't go like this. Like, it coming up off of that tank is very, very strong. And so it's very clear that that is the biggest source of odors that you all smell. Typically skunky, putrid, rotten cabbage. I mean, yes, you could just call it food. It's surprising to me because it all smells just bad to me. I can't tell the difference. I'm not a dog. I don't have those degrees of smell. But there are a lot of people are able to describe it using those specific words.
Shannon, one of the questions from one of the residents was about the odors and if there are any harmful effects.
So none of these chemicals have health concerns. In fact, the concentrations that we're talking about, they're very, very low. But the odor thresholds for these, our noses are actually very sensitive to these compounds, and we can pick them up, which is, and again, like, when you look at like the hydrogen sulfide, that's why that's used as like a tracer, that's because you can pick it up pretty easily. But there are no harmful, health effects. And we know this, we've done actually, at the Baldwinsville plant, we had odors that were orders of magnitude higher than this, and we did actually go and do an environmental health and safety study for our employees, because we were concerned, they're in this environment, are there some, short, long-term
The
concerns?
union's done in the past as well to do a comparison for the employees. Also, in a past life, I did the hazmat pre-planning and training for Manoa Fire Department, and then was an instructor for Manlius Fire Department. We did pre-plan here. I took many tours there.
Yeah.
And I could say, like, if I had to explain it to people in a training session, what I try to tell people is there's not immediate health concerns, but there's a high degree of irritation.
Yes.
And irritation can come in forms of you get an upset stomach because that smells could, just a smell, not an unharmful smell could do that to you. You get a headache. And you can just, they have general feelings of like malaise in general, it's from these, but they're not causing you like things that should put you in the hospital.
So that's really, I mean, and again, I think that's where, like, a lot of times when people say, well, just make it stop smelling, you gotta understand what it is that's smelling first, and you gotta understand where it's coming from.
So we toured the Manoa plant, which
Yeah.
is much smaller, but it really doesn't smell. But it also doesn't like maintain the sludge like
So
that.
that's actually not true. It may not have smelled when we were there, but being at that firehouse, as long as I have been around it, you can smell it, but it'll pick up during certain times. And it's like, it's not every day that Meadowbrook stinks. There's times we go out, but it will smell there at times.
I will tell you, Meadowbrook smells all the time.
But it's
Just
just
where it
the wind,
carries.
It
right?
depends on which way the wind is shifting, if you're gonna pick it up or not. And I think that's, to that point, like, we've had a lot of residents, and I've even gone through and, talked to people, and they're like, no, I swear it just smelled. Like, I believe you, because if I stand here and I wait long enough for the wind to shift, I'll pick it up. Or if I've driven through the neighborhood and I can smell it here, and I don't smell it there, and then all of a sudden I pick it back up again over here. That's the hardest part too, and I think when we had, take those complaints and you come out and you're trying to find it, you're trying to get there as soon as the wind, keep the wind going that right direction. So odors are one of those weird things that are hard for us to track down, but they're also a very helpful way. That's how we find out that there's issues with the system. We have some neighbors who have very sensitive noses that let us know when the treatment plan has changed, it smells angry today, or it smells different, what's changed, and that's how we've used it to find force main breaks and sewer backup issues, for pipelines that are running through. Actually, along Onondaga, there's the Liverpool force main, we had a resident call and say, oh, something smells really bad. We had an issue with one of the valves and it was leaking, so, odors aren't necessarily a bad thing for us, they're an indicator. They're an indicator, so.
So, this might be another good segue for you, just on your next slide, but like, okay, so now what do we do, right?
What do we do? So, we capture them.
So I just got texted, just to let you know, the smell is at a high point right now.
We should have done this
Of course it
presentation,
is.
like,
We're,
from your neighborhood.
we're Spring Mountain and turns into Snowball Run on the end that's by the golf course.
So-
Oh,
so
yeah.
Go home that way.
Yeah, right? And I'll be like, yeah, no. The biggest thing, we can't make wastewater not smell, but we can capture its smells and we can treat them. And so what you're seeing on this slide, this is our standard approach. Carpet the tanks, ventilate the tanks, treat the ventilation. This is the Brewerton wastewater treatment plant, which what you're looking at on the right-hand side, instead of grading, open grading on that tank, it's a solid cover on the tank that's completely enclosed. And then on the lower left-hand side, you can see that gray pipe coming across is actually the ductwork pulling the air off of that tank and sending it through. So the beyond those bollards, in the one container or the one little structure there is inside is a blower. It's basically pulling the air off and then it's passing it through that little tank looking thing that inside there is activated carbon. So it's passing the air through the carbon's stripping out the chemical, there's odors, the compounds, and then ventilating clean air.
So it's like a charcoal filter kind of thing.
That's all it is. It's an activated charcoal filter. And so this is
charcoal.
well, yeah, a really big one. And actually, so the system at Meadowbrook will be a lot larger than this because that tank is bigger. We've got more space that we're gonna be covering and more air that we're gonna be pulling out of there. And so what we're actually proposing for, our engineers have been working on the project, they're proposing two separate systems, one for the sludge processing area, if you recall, like, there's one source of odors, and then there'll be another system for the headworks at the influent side of things. So we'll be taking the air coming out of that building and passing it through a similar system. So the two places where we've got odors, we're gonna treat it and remove it.
So is that the influent?
Yeah, that'll be the
Okay.
influent, yeah.
So you're gonna capture and treat the air that smells bad, but are you gonna change, like you mentioned, like in Beeville, that you changed the way the sludge was being processed? Are you gonna do that also?
We don't need to do that here. Baldwinsville has its own special treatment system, so it's one of the only plants that has its own sludge processing facility, so we're not trying to Baldwinsville.
So they're not taking it from Beeville to Metro?
So, no. And so one of the things that we did talk about, right, was we started the system up and we suddenly started getting a lot of noise complaints. And what we found was actually the contractor had installed it in reverse. And so instead of grabbing the air and pushing it through, it was actually trying to, suck the air through. And so it was vibrating a bunch of them. And so when they actually flipped the piping back in the correct direction through the odor control system, the noise went away.
I think the only people that would, unless it's real, only people who would hear that if it was noisy here in our town, would be if they all think are long enough to down. I don't know what's happening.
You can't even hear it. When you're at that plant, you can't hear it. And honestly, we were surprised when we started it up that it was, you could just tell something was wrong. It didn't take us long to figure it out. But that, beyond that, we've got 0 complaints from the Brewerton property. our neighbors at Baldwinsville and are now having community picnics and inviting us. They're so excited, because we don't smell anymore. And that, you know, that is our intent with the Meadowbrook facility. We're gonna do the same. We're gonna put covers on. We're gonna treat this. We're going to be a better neighbor.
So what is our time frame?
So,
This is a very intuitive presentation.
well, I try. I do public speaking every now and then. So actually, this on the left-hand side, this is actually, that's the odor control system that was going in at our Baldwinsville plant. It was to give you an idea of the Meadowbrook Limestone won't be that big, but it won't be as little as Brewerton. The project implementation, you know, you kind of got the 8 steps there to kind of show you what has to be done for us to get to a spot where we have odor control. As I mentioned, the first step was the odor study. That's done. Hire an engineer. That's done. The engineer has prepared, everything we do going back to DEC we're regulated by DEC. So anytime we change our treatment facilities, we have to get DEC's approval. That starts with the report. So we got the report from our engineer that shows what we're going to be building, how it's going to treat the treatment plant. That goes to them for approvals. That's actually, I think, going out today now. It's going out this month because we got at the beginning of August. And in parallel path, we're going to continue on and start developing those construction plans so we can hire a contractor. All in this project, and actually they put the $12 million on it, but this is actually odor control is part of a bigger project that's replacing those thickeners, the sludge thickeners at Brewerton and Meadowbrook Limestone. So this is a $12 million project. We are presenting it in the 2025 budget in September, and we will be getting legislative approvals for that in early February, with the intent to advertise for construction in spring of 25 and start construction in summer of 25, with the plan to have the entire system online in summer of 26.
Is that being paid for with a bond or just through funding from the legislation?
So it will be bonded, and so obviously most of our capital projects are local bonds and then paid for through ratepayer rate fees.
Are you applying for grants?
This isn't typically, because of the nature of the project, it's not typically eligible for grant programs. The majority of the project is, the cost is the rotary drum thickeners, because it's replacement in kind. Typical, you know, EFC, WQIP, DEC grants.
So going back to your first part, so reducing the odor, which is from the user point of view, we care about.
Yes.
But improving the water quality, which is the consent order, and the actual pollution is separate from this. The smell doesn't hurt any fish or anything.
Correct.
So yeah, when it infiltrates, it pushes out waste that's unable to be treated, right? Is that what?
So what happens, right, so kind of going back to where we started, when, much like, let me, how to describe this, so when it starts to rain, we get massive flows, it comes in and it floods that influent building, so that I was showing you, we start to flood there, and then when all of the influent ones kick on, they send more water than the tanks can hold in it, and actually, during Tropical Storm Fred, it did start to spill over the tanks and onto the ground. So that's really what's happening, is it's just more water than hydraulically can pass through the plant. So, which means the plant isn't operating in optimum, you know, to remove the organics, to sever the sludge, to do all those things that we need to do.
So in a high water situation, does it like wash all the bugs away?
It does.
Yeah, so then you have to start sort of over.
It does, and we have, what I didn't talk about was on that sludge processing side, there's a couple of empty tanks. And one of the things that we do during wet weather, when we know wet weather's coming, and if it's not gonna be a significant storm in duration, we will start to pump raw wastewater into those tanks. So
That's what's behind the most.
that's something totally different. But at Meadowbrook Limestone, we actually have about 1.5 million gallons of tank
Sort of
capacity.
storage capacity.
Yep. And so that is one of the ways that we do help the plant ride through short, high-intensity storms, is we will pump raw wastewater over there, and then when this flows subside, we push it back in the park.
So that's like a thunderstorm event, not like a week long of heavy rain.
Yeah, not a week-long event, yeah, a week-long event, and it's, and so there are things that we do have a wet weather operating plan that we are required through TPC to have, that says, okay, wet weather's coming, what are you gonna do to protect the plant?
Shannon,
Yeah.
Couple questions. The sludge trucks, how often do those go from here to the main?
So I think the Meadowbrook, I wanna say the Meadowbrook plant does, like 2 trucks a day, and sometimes 3, but sometimes less, but it's on average 1 or 2 trucks.
Is this project meant to duplicate what's going on in Baldwinsville? Processing the sludge there, or
No, we won't ever be adding sludge processing to this facility, because the plant is too small. Typically, we wanna be up over 10 million gallons per day. For a wastewater treatment plant to have that type of processing added, it needs to be pretty big. So like our Oak Orchard treatment plant, when we look to the future as it's going to get bigger, it will get its own sludge processing. So we'll stop hauling from that facility. Any other questions?
Yes, Shannon, thank you. This is great, very informative. Is there any chance that the legislature would not approve this when it's brought before them?
I don't think so. You know, I think, we've been, I think the legislature has historically been very supportive of infrastructure investments. And particularly, this project, it does those rotary drum thickeners, which is the core of the project, are really important for us to be able to maintain that sludge processing. So the ones that are at the 2 facilities are at the end of the useful life, we have to replace them. And again, some of that is we are permitted by DEC, so
Shannon, we've got, it's like the back of everyone's mind, probably in the forefront of many others. With Micron coming, they're gonna need such incredible levels of wastewater treatment that it's almost impossible to wrap your mind around. And we'll have a tremendous population increase very quickly. How will the required investment in Micron from WEP and from the county affect our project? Like, is there any likelihood or chance that will be delayed as a result of the increased priority in Micron? And then if we've got 100,000 people who move here, are we gonna have at Meadowbrook enough capacity to handle the increase in the sewage treatment?
I think I counted 3 questions. But there might have been 4.
My paper just says Micron question mark, so that's.
Yeah. So let's start with the Micron investments, right? Micron's industrial wastewater is being handled by a completely separate entity and a completely separate system apart from the water environment protection. We do sanitary wastewater. We do have some industrial wastewater customers, but nothing to the magnitude of Micron. And so in order to optimize treatment, we're segregating their waste and it's going to go to an industrial system. So there's one way that we are not, like the county ratepayers are not paying for that industrial system.
Does it have to be built still?
Oh, yeah.
It'll be a new industrial system.
Yeah, it'll be a
Not that
whole new
way.
separate system. So what are we doing, right? So we'll pull back and talk about what is our department doing and what are we looking at, right? Community growth is coming. We know that. We know that there's going to be a significant increase, particularly up in the northern area. And so some of the stuff that we've already started doing is, we've got a new collection systems director that's actually looking at the capacity that their role is going to be to look at the entire collection system. What is the capacity of it? Where is growth happening? What are our restrictions? What are some of the issues are there upgrades that need to happen? Is there I-9 that needs to be removed? really looking at, okay, if a subdivision is coming in here, does the system downstream have the capacity to do that, yes or no? And so we're working on developing those programs to better position ourselves to support what's coming in the community. At the treatment plant level, we have a process control director that we've recently hired, doing the exact same thing at our treatment plants, the 6 treatment plants. Where are they operating? What kind of capacity do they have left? Is what that service area, working with county planning and local municipalities, what are they seeing in terms of development and what's coming? And does the treatment plant have capacity? And once we get, keeping in mind it, most of our plants all have capacity available to support local community development. And really, it's not till we get to, there's a percentage that we get to, and I don't want to quote the numbers, I don't remember it off the top of my head. When we're running at an average day at, say, 85% capacity, we're gonna be working with DEC to say, okay, what are the upgrades? What's the increased capacity needs to happen? We're already doing that at Oak Orchard because we know what's coming is going to push us to that limit. So that facility is gonna get upgraded.
Which facility was that?
The Oak Orchard treatment. And so that's happening there.
That's because you said expected growth in the north.
Yeah.
It's the expected sanitary flows from Micron. It's all of the community development that's gonna happen. So that's that service area. Some of the things that we're looking at here, the Meadowbrook plant, we do know is gonna have an upgrade, because of the hydraulic issues. We're gonna fix the collection system as much as we can, but at some point, we're gonna have to make upgrades to add some hydraulic capacity. When we start looking at that plan, that's when we'll look at the service area and say, what kind of development is coming, what more capacity needs to be added. So that's the kind of stuff that we're doing to plan for what's coming. And as much as we're gonna ramp up in population, it's
It'll be gradual.
it's gonna be gradual, we have time.
But so today, I'm glad, thank you for saying this, because this was one of my only questions right here was, and fellow board members, correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but it perked my ears up to know in advance of this session with you all today, we've had a couple of very large developments come before us and cheerfully assure us they already have their capacity letters from WEP to Twin Shores and the Jolex one. And I thought, how can that be if we're having such issues?
And
it's
we have
unrelated, right?
two that run us.
And so some of that stuff that we can do now, and what we have under our consent order is they are required to help us make investments in a collection system on what's called a 2-to-1 offset. So if they need 100,000 gallons per day capacity, they have to work with us to find 200,000 gallons of wet weather flow.
Who's they?
And what is
The
wet
developer?
weather flow mean?
Wet weather flow is
Infiltration.
infiltration, sump pumps.
On-site water management.
Yeah,
But they have to find it.
they don't necessarily have to find it, they work with us. And that's some of the stuff that we're now working out is now that we've got consolidation in place, what is that mechanism, what does that look like, and how do we do it?
So-
It's the number 2 cited concern for the people who are showing up and overflowing our boardroom when these projects come in front is sewer treatment.
Yeah.
With the first being traffic.
I think their question, like I'm trying to remember, because we did have a proposal, that we did not approve or did not move forward with to do an apartment complex on Burdick, so right around the corner. And the feedback we got from people was, you already have so many issues with Meadowbrook, how can we have population? But it doesn't sound like like we could add that many more people and this problem might get worse. But I also think that kind of the other message was, how could you build something in an area that smells so bad? So I think they were really saying both.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the second one will remain an issue until, if you say on this time frame until summer 2026, the traffic issue notwithstanding. But it sounds like no matter what, it's not a capacity issue at this time.
It's not a dry weather capacity, like, the Meadowbrook treatment plant has a 6.5 million gallon per day capacity. And I think on a normal day, it's operating somewhere between 3 and 4 million gallons. So it's operating at like 55 to 60% of its capacity. So it's got a lot of space left. It's not during normal days. It's during those really wet days, like the days we're having now.
At which point, it's more than just Meadowbrook treatment, it's all the pump stations going to it.
It's everything. Yeah.
The whole system.
So
It's
the
the whole
INI is
system.
really your concern
That is our concern.
in terms of capacity.
Correct, correct.
And explain briefly the offset mechanism. Do they just give you money for you to do research, or how does that work?
It's complicated. It's complicated. And I would say, I think that's one of the things that we are looking to stand up a new program. Some ways that it can be done, or as it has been done in the past. Some municipalities, when we didn't lease their systems, would charge an INI offset fee, $4 per gallon per day, or, one of the ways that some other, that has been done as well is, here's a project, hand it to the developer, and I think the city of Syracuse does it this way, and we've done it with some municipalities, where we say, we have these 7 manholes that need to be rehabbed. Hire a contractor, go get it done, and confirm for us that it's been done, and then once we've signed off, you can go ahead.
Is there a mechanism for residents to communicate the location of known INI? Like, they know, like, where I, it was a stressor, but where you see water shooting up out of the manhole and you kind of know there's a problem?
Yeah, that should be reported, and if you have an area that you've seen that, there is on our website, there is a phone number, our dispatch center, 24 hours a day, it's manned. Call that, if you see something, say something, and so we know.
I learned a lot about this when I bought my home, and 6 months later, massive problems. Called the line, folks were out till midnight, 2 in the morning, and basically addressing the fact that the pump station can't handle what's going on, you just gotta wait it out. It's a weather problem.
There was water, I went to his house during the storm, and there was water just like geysering out of the ground. And it did not smell good. I was like, what am I standing in? And I was like, I wanna move.
435. It's the one we posted on Facebook.
Yeah.
3142, yeah. It has a poop emoji that we put, it's saved in some of these phones.
But in fact, it's
Right.
it's a responsive organization. Thank you for highlighting the fact that it's weather related.
It is weather related, and I think there is, and we're aware that it is a problem, and I think as an entity and across the entire collection system, and it's not just unique to this area. It is in the town of Camillus, it's in the town of Gaddis, it's in the town of Salina, and what a lot of these neighborhoods all have in common, built in the 50s, floor drains in the basements, footer drains that were connected to the sanitary sewer lateral, because at that time, wastewater treatment was not as expensive as it was, so it was a great way to get the water away from your property and get it down, get it downstream, but as wastewater, as our regulations, and we had to start getting more and more stringent requirements, we don't want that clean groundwater in there, but it's not an easy way there's not an easy way to get that out. But yeah, so a lot of things that we talk about, we are really trying to get out and do some more education to the public. If you have a sump pump, please disconnect it if you can, if you've got a footer drain, if you've got a basement back of it, you've got a floor drain. That's a big one for us, like plug your floor drain, you don't need it, plug it, if that's where it's coming in, plug it. So I think, hopefully you're gonna start to see a lot more public education, public outreach from us. We do have a new website, it just launched this week.
Cool.
I'm pretty excited about that. We're having an open house, it's called Wet Fest, on September 21st.
That sounds like, honestly, so much fun.
So we're pretty excited about this. Our metro treatment plant is turning 100 this fall.
Oh,
So it's kind of a big deal. So,
I've got several family members that work at Metro or who are retired from Metro, so I'll make sure we all RSVP together.
you won't even recognize the place. We have made so much investment and changes to it over the last probably 5-6 years.
I did a tour of Metro when I did Citizens Academy, which would have been probably, my daughter was a baby, probably was 2014. And we went and did a whole tour. It was so
It's way
fascinating.
different now.
Completely
That's
different
plan
plan.
now. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
When is Wet Fest?
September 21st, it's a Saturday from 10 to 2.
And I'm confused because when I came on the board, the members who were here prior say we sold our sewer system to the county, but you keep using the term leased. Can you clarify what we are doing with you, with the
You
county?
are still the title owners.
Okay.
You are
own
the
sewer system.
landlords of the sewer system and we are the tenant. We have leased it for 40 years for $1.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this investment.
That was one of the first things that all the John and myself and Heather and Elaine did right after we were elected, because it was right before everything got shut down. I remember you guys coming.
So Shannon, I have a two-part question. So first part is, can you share your slides so we can post it on our website?
Absolutely.
And we can direct folks who weren't able to
$1
be here.
$2 a year.
And the second part relates to the timetable, Mike, the timetable. Several of the neighbors are aware of the timetable, but have asked, is there any way to expedite it? So Mike and I have lived in the neighborhood around 8 years or so, his family and my families. And some of my neighbors who are here have been in the neighborhoods much longer and have said, we've been dealing with it so long, why does it take 2 years? So, you know, you
Actually, takes
outlined.
4.
Yeah.
So here's one of the things that we are looking at now, why it takes so long, right? Obviously, we've got a bunch of different times we have to go back to DEC to get approvals. The other part that takes so long is this equipment, we're not going to Home Depot to buy it. And it, which everybody knows with supply chain, when you start looking at very complex things, probably 5-10 years ago, the lead times on some of this stuff would have been 6 to 8 months. We saw a period, like the Meadowbrook project, where the lead times got out to 18 months to almost 2 years. We're starting to see those drop again, the supply chain's recovering. So that's some of the stuff that like we know that the odor control system and some of these pieces of equipment are going to probably be a longer lead time. So we're looking at, is there some way to take parts and pieces of this and bid it in sections to accelerate getting that equipment more quicker. So the team is looking at that to try and figure out how to get the odor control going quicker. Because the rotary drum thickeners, and I don't know if you remember me saying this, it's part, the odor control is part of a bigger project. Those the thickeners are still an 18 to 24 month lead time. So if we lump the odor control, if we keep them into that, it's going to be, we're gonna be out of ways. So we're looking at taking them out and bidding them earlier.
So are you saying, is there a possibility, I'll tell you where this comes from, I'm not impatient because I've been waiting here. One of my immediate neighbor is one of the original people to build in there. And my heart is there for him because he came over, and his walker, he approaches 90s and said, I appreciate everything. They're not gonna do anything. They've been yelling about this since 1991, and they're not gonna do anything. I would love to see him be here, to see it done. I know you can't make any promises, but I'm wondering if there's any way that anything can be expedited in the way of approvals and, you know, getting something on order now, or.
We can't, so 2 things. We can't order equipment until we have funding from the legislature. We can't, and we won't go to the legislature until we know that DEC is going to approve what we're going to build. So we have to get through those DEC approvals so that we make sure that when we ask for funding from the legislature, that it is something that we can actually build. So unfortunately, the soonest that we can put this out to bid is in February, once we've got the legislative authorization. And I think so the dates that we're giving you are the accelerated, like we're looking at accelerating the odor control. If we leave odor control in with drum thickeners,
Right.
we're looking closer to 27.
Okay.
So I've asked the team to give me their best if they segment the project.
The stuff that has to be with DEC is with DEC now.
The first report, I believe they're going through, it's gonna be going out the end of this month to submit to DEC, because we got the draft at the end of July, and we need to review that and make sure it's what we want before we submit it to DEC.
Okay.
But it's any day now.
Carol,
Is there a question too?
Yeah.
So just quickly, the timetable. So during construction, it sounds like another summer.
Yes.
During construction, traditionally, is it the same, better or worse
It'll be
just
exactly,
to prepare the neighbors for
it's
what's
exactly the
process.
same, because the only thing we're doing for construction is putting the cover on the tank and putting in a ventilation system.
So could you drop some essential oil in there?
So funny story about that.
Poopery, that's how they use
My grandma loves that.
We actually, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were like, there's gotta be something interim that we could do, and they actually did try, you know, dumping different things in the tank. It just,
It's eviscerated.
yeah, no, and they honestly, they did something similar to Baldwinsville, 4 or 5 years ago, no, longer than that, maybe it was 10 years ago. They had fence line misters. We're not doing that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right,
you don't want me to do that.
Alyssa has a question and then
Is there a possibility that the legislature might say $12 million is a bit high, let's take off some of these things that don't really seem to be that necessary, like the order control?
They typically, that typically doesn't happen on our capital improvement programs, on our projects. You know, I think we go through a pretty rigorous approval process before we can even get to the legislature, so we don't put forth projects unless they're absolutely needed, so.
But we have so many people who've reached out to the legislature. They are very well aware of this issue. Like the neighbors have been fantastic about engaging with the powers that be at the county level, because like the town board, we're pretty, like, we have no control over any of this. So like we've been making that clear and asking them to reach out, and they've done a great job. So I think that it would be pretty irresponsible at this point to not support it when you know it's just like a critical issue to so many people out here.
I don't wanna brag on our legislators, but I think we are, in my experience in 25 years of infrastructure, we are very fortunate. We have a really great legislature and county executive office that really do support infrastructure, so we are blessed.
Sarah. So this is being recorded, and so maybe so who watch later on, a couple of questions, so.
Yeah.
Great presentation, great information. Timetable wise, I'm trying to address Mike's neighbor's question. Is there website documentation? Is there somewhere where people can be informed as to that timetable and how things are progressing?
So on our new website, there's a capital improvements program page, and there's spotlight, I think there's, I forget what they called it, but there's project highlight pages. And Meadowbrook Limestone Orders Project is one of the pages that was launched this week.
Second question then, the gradings. Why were the grades put on in the first place in the last situation, in the last tank, versus just a cap?
Cheaper? You need something to walk over the tank. I mean, I think grading over tanks is pretty standard, so.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, and I think and because you didn't have ventilation and then you covered the tank, you're gonna have to provide some sort of ventilation.
When we did it from hazmat to hazmat, that's what the plant operator said, the gases would build, and they would have to have a mechanism to pull it out.
Yeah.
And where it would go is the same places it would go through.
And now it's concentrated, so.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just curious, because there's rainwater going in, right?
Yep.
Rains, so I didn't know how that changes the content. And then could you clarify a little more with the lease, because I think you got interrupted. How does that, so the town owns it,
Town owns it,
you bought it, you're the tenant,
we lease it.
how do you make money at this?
We
This is
pay
not
sewer
about,
taxes.
this is,
Yeah, we
I mean, I'll let Shannon answer, but this was not a money-making endeavor for them, it was a court order, so.
But I'm sure we probably pay it in our taxes.
So the way it works is, what is our benefit? Why would we do this? And again, so it's because under our permits, we are required to control what comes into our wastewater treatment plant facility. And because we don't own your system, mechanisms that we can do that are, we can permit each of the towns and require a unit, we could meter your systems, and then we can enforce that, which I think had been looked at over the years, but difficult because your system is so interconnected with ours that it would be really hard to find a point of where we would permit. The second mechanism is that we just take it over and we own it. The transfer of ownership of a sewer system would involve a lot of lawyers, a lot of title search. So instead you lease it for a long term. It's actually the exact same mechanism that Aqua uses. Aqua took over all of the local water systems through a lease agreement. So we use their lease agreement as our model. So what that does is it essentially gives us a long-term title, so we can borrow money to fix the sewers. Why is this good for us? And actually, so now the consolidation conversation is coming back to me. Because we can take, if we invest in the collection systems and we get that water out, we don't have to treat as much. It's cheaper for us to treat, it keeps capacity, keeps us out of violation of DEC.
Right.
So we have financial incentive to own the local systems.
This was before, because this conversation came to the town board right at the beginning of 2020, and Shannon came out, and who was the gentleman that was with you?
The commissioner at the time was Frank Benson.
Yes, and Frank came out, and
Town resident.
we had you out there like 3 or 4 times, because we kept saying we wanted to ask you more questions, so you spent a lot of time out mailing us those few months before everything shut down, but the big case, the case was made to us, and like what finally compelled us to agree to the lease agreement was to fix the problems and to comply with the DEC order, they needed to have control. Like, to fix what's broken, they had to have some legal ownership of it, or in this case, a lease, because otherwise they couldn't go and figure out what was wrong, they couldn't fix it, they would never be able to meet the DEC's requirements. So we thought about it very carefully, and unfortunately at that time, our meetings were not yet live streamed. We started that, we were putting those things in place, but it didn't start till the pandemic. So we don't, but the minutes of those meetings are available, so you can go back and like review at least like some of the thought process. But that was the decision at the time.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the background. I'm not questioning it was good or bad.
Yeah.
Like,
So how does it work?
Well, how can we get $12 million faster? Right? That's what I'm trying
Oh,
to.
that's not as
Well,
fast.
it's all held up by DEC, so anything to do with
Yeah,
DEC
no, I think
is really slow.
Well, if the county has to vote on a bond, that's not gonna get quicker either. And it's gonna all be in the 2025 budget, so they're just on the budget cycle.
And so you asked like, how do we pay for this? We pay for it in your sewer unit term, right? And so that's the other big benefit, like we as a big entity can take on a $12 million project. We can take on, fixing all the pump station projects, that a small town, and that was one of the bigger issues that we're seeing is a lot of the small local municipalities don't have engineers on staff, don't have all the resources. We do. So this just makes more sense for it to be consolidated under a larger piece.
Yeah, I'm just thinking down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good, 12 million is not a lot. It gets paid for, just to maintain it, make sure things are working properly.
But what could we do to get a tour? I would like a tour. What can we get on a schedule?
So if you go to the new website, plug, there is, if you want a tour, there is a page that you can go and request a tour of the facilities.
I think it would be great if we had like a couple key neighbors from the community and then a couple of town board members. We could all go inside and get some eyes on it. At the very least, it's probably very interesting, but maybe bring like a clothespin with you.
Don't stand up on top of
And
the
don't
tank,
stand on top of
especially if you have someplace you wanna go afterwards. But no, I do think if you wanted to reach out, what I would suggest is have one person reach out and coordinate that, pick a date, pick a time. We're happy to give tours, we love showing off our infrastructure, so, yeah.
One more, how do you look to see where the water's coming in the most through these pump stations?
So that's a really cool question. We actually, do you know anything about watershed modeling?
Oh,
Yeah.
left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we actually
You
have within the network of pipes, we have like nodes, points where a bunch of pipes come together. We put meters.
Okay.
In large points and we just watch and we see what happens. And then the process of elimination, wow, this little spot came up really quickly. So then we go up each of the hallways and drop more meters. That's it. And we do have, our pump stations do have flow meters in them, so we can use those. Those are built in ways that we can watch and see what's going on. But yeah, that's exactly what we're doing right now in this collection system and a couple others, it's just metering flow and hunting it down.
Before we go too far away from where we were with the lease, now that I'm understanding it better, if I was to simplify it by saying, it's basically like when you lease a property, an apartment, or a business, and you lease and pay, but you're responsible for everything inside the building, not the owner, the tenant. Is that basically what we're doing in this instance, and you lease so that the control allows you to maintain and upgrade the system?
The biggest thing that the
And the
lease.
town doesn't have to maintain and
Correct.
upgrade the system? Okay.
We take over, under the lease agreement, we assume all responsibilities for the maintenance, operation, and replacement of that system. Why a lease, why a 40-year lease is because any of our borrowing, any of our funding, we have to have titled interest to that for the duration of the note. So we typically bond for 20 years. ESC bonds for, if we do an ESC loan, it's 20 years. Some other entities might allow us to borrow for a longer term, but that's fine. We're looking for 2 major capital periods of investment before we need to kind of deal with the title issue again.
What does EFC stand for?
Environmental Facilities Corporation, it's the funding arm of DEC.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Anything else you want to know about?
Are we looking at Facebook Live? Are there any questions from the public?
We don't ever.
You can't see them on there, but hey, write the comments or turn
I
off.
mean,
Oh, I can show
We don't open, we don't do that. But there's one person online, but there's no hand raised.
Okay. So for Jack, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand.
so this is on Zoom.
It's on Facebook Live too, but we don't do question and answers.
Right.
So it's live right now on Zoom, or on Facebook Live. It'll be on our YouTube page tomorrow. And then I will post the video and,
slide deck.
your new website.
And the website.
Yes, your new website with.
And follow us on Facebook.
Yep,
I can follow.
and the slideshow on the website
Okay, great.
tomorrow, so.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you guys very much for coming out.
Yeah, thank you for coming, thank you
Thank you.
for the visuals and all of the explanations.
You're welcome.
It's super helpful.
I do appreciate the questions ahead of time too,